Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the discussion focusing on the fourth chapter of the book Jesus in Our Days. The psychological series by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis, as we know, and to me, is such a powerful, such impactful book. And during our series of discussions, we will discuss those insightful messages contained in the first book of the series. Jesus in Our Days is a small book, and it was written, authored by Joanna de Angelis in collaboration with Divaldo, Pereira, Franco. We review on a weekly basis the book chapter by chapter, containing a different topic, and together I hope to reach a different perspective about Jesus as we're confronted how Jesus behaved, how Jesus dealt with each of those topics. But as we dive into his teachings, we are taken by how they continue to touch us and amaze us even today, and even the most skeptical scholars. Joanna de Angelis presents to us an uncrucified Jesus. So let us welcome him in our lives so we can address different situations like him. And here's my invitation to continue to look for answers in Jesus' therapeutical teachings and find health and peace and happiness. So let's go to the book proper. As you can see here, we are on the fourth chapter, and we're going to be today talking about Jesus and love. I want to be able to see that we are talking now about divine consciousness. The human figure, Jesus, confirms his origin, his accomplishment as the most perfect, complete being that has ever walked the earth. And I like when we get to this point because we need to think about his entire life was unfolded along deadlines of that divine consciousness. And it's important here for us to think, as this quote shows, he maintained his individuality in this perfect balance. As a result, he came to us and he inspired us. And he touches us to date because of that clear character, that crystal clear character, if you think about it. And when we discuss and study Jesus, we see that he never ever submitted to what was the context of the time, the parameters of the time, or what was the historical area. What are we talking about? We're talking about the culture of the time was rather primitive. And I want you to listen to this very clearly because it is eye-opening. The culture of the time was demonstrated or described as one with moral corruption, of hypocritical conservatism, arbitrary laws, and a overly, exaggerated preoccupation with your appearances in detriment to the authentic values. So when I read this, when I read and reflect upon the description of the primitive culture of 2 millennia ago, right? And when I go through even this book that was written 34 years ago in 1989, it makes me wonder, are we not learning, or Are we not learning fast enough about being authentic? So, Joanna talks about Jesus, and she calls him the bearer of authentic courage. And I pause to ask myself, if not morally corrupt, if not overly preoccupied with outward appearances, am I, and this is for me and you, right? Are we demonstrating authentic courage? And the answer can be yes or no, or maybe can say even sometimes. But how did Jesus demonstrate this value? He he strove against injustice, right? And he did that every situation without failure. He was constant. He he um, he did that even when, and this is important for us to think about as well, there's a general consensus about what we may now think of it as a criminal act, but they were condoned at the time. So thinking about it, we come to perhaps discuss the idea that throughout history we have seen crimes against humanity that have been condoned, and those are systemic criminal acts on behalf of a state of authority uh, or some sort of tyranny, right? But they include examples are wars, Holocaust during World War II, murder, massacre, genocide, ethnic cleansing, dehumanization, types of execution, sponsorship of those executions, kidnapping, unfair, unjust imprisonment, torture, enslavement, rape, political repression, racial discrimination, religious persecution. All of those are considered crimes against humanity. And it's so sad, isn't it, to know that some of this still very much present in our society. But how should I confront the society that I'm immersed in? Well, in the case of Jesus, he, and I love it, he remained serene in the most adverse circumstances, and even cheerful when it was a circumstance that was quite emotionally charged. He did so by being patient, by being peaceful, and demonstrating that synchronicity, right, of his inner values and the Creator by continue to keep that state of harmony. And if once again we pause to ask ourselves, well, how do I maintain peace? How do I establish peace when peace is not around us? And I look for another book, another small book by Joanna de Angelis. It's called Optimism. And she brings the idea that we should, regarding peace, we should never wait or even expect that others are the vehicles by establishing peace, that we should be that instrument. So she says, if we're aware that a word can lead to a sense of peace in whatever circumstances, very generic, right? But if I know that a word can lead to peace, let's be the one to say it. If a sense of balance, a sense of equilibrium are key elements to sustain harmony, whatever circumstances, let's be the ones to project that. Love it. If my attitude, your attitude, our attitudes can somehow influence a sense of tranquility, a sense of peace in others. Let's make an effort to have, to express, to demonstrate that attitude. And then she says, speak and do everything that will lead to peace. What she means by that is your words, your voice, your tone, your opinions, your clarifying statements all should contain the vibration of love, meaning, in my own understanding, that if I speak, but I speak with love, if I explain, but if I explain with love, if I am through my voice, my words, my tone, a loving person, peace will be established. And finally, this is really important for me, I'm afraid. She says, never act impulsively. And what she means by that is that we should never be reactive to any situation, right? Just to stand still. And if action is required, that action be very intentional. Because let's think about it. In back to Jesus' day, he lived in a violent and perverse society, and yet he chose love as a solution to all matters at hand. He chose unrestricted, unlimited, unconditional forgiveness. And he did that as the therapeutical element for all that those who were based in that world, right? In the context, we were sick. Therefore, he used that as the therapy of the time. He used love to heal all of our illnesses. But think again for us, how would we choose love and forgiveness? And I love Joanna de Angelis has a little book called it's a book containing messages, like little tiny messages each page. And in this little book, Joanna, A Happy Life, Joanna simply says, be friendly to all of those who seek you and seek your support or your presence. Simple. Be welcoming, be open, be friendly. We know there are many of us today that are somehow crowded with people all around them, and they yet suffer loneliness of such proportion. And all they need is a sense of welcome, a sense of belonging, a sense of companionship or friendship. So, this is our big lesson for us today. If we think about it, to never, ever, ever, the lesson, never, never, ever allow anyone who has had any type of interaction with us to leave that moment of interaction without taking something good, something positive from those times with us. Do you accept this challenge? I'm taking the challenge for me. So, in whatever interaction we are, let's look for what am I giving? What is the value, if you will, I am creating for that person? And we stop here to say, but what is love, right? In the book Self Discovery, Joanna tells us that love is our creative superpower, right? Creativity and powerful, oh, uh, strength in us. It's our creative superpower. It is the most impactful element that we have in us, love. And love is responsible for, if you think about it, if we analyze, and we can go through this lens, let me search for life, but you find love in the most amazing work that humanity has produced today. And I have to say, I immediately, my mind goes into the one of the seven wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, that is a monument for love, right? And outside of the Taj Mahal, of a building, if we start to look at organizations or types of activities, types of, it doesn't even have to be when we think of nonprofit, it's easier for us, but any type of human endeavor that contain an expression of love behind its idealization and its execution, it's it it is concrete and it survives it all because love as that feeling that motivates us will catapult us to move forward. in in fact, love is the element that will guide us, will direct us in our most pure ideals and will support us when we go against any obstacles. So, if you want something, let's first look for love to quote unquote contaminate our ideals and we'll be okay. But in the same vein, and I've been joking here, but in the same vein, can we also think about, because they go hand in hand, right? Can we talk about forgiveness? Because um, earlier last year, right, we spent several weeks together learning from the book Wake Up and Be Happy by Joanna de Angelis. And in that book from the same psychological series, Joanna talked a little bit about forgiveness, and she says true forgiveness is only possible when we completely forget what? We forget about the pain that was occurred, the pain that was inflicted, the pain that we suffered when something happened. Depth psychology will teach us that forgiveness is actually the ability to overcome the feelings that are, the disturbing feelings that can be somehow expressed by, oh, say hatred, oh, say desire for revenge, right? You were hurt, you were in pain, and you have that notion that, oh, I hate that person that caused me pain. I hate and I want something bad to happen to that person. And it says, well, when you forgive truly, you're no longer motivated by those feelings. And in depth psychology, it teaches as well that an integral being. And spoiler alert, we will be discussing that book called Integral Being next after this series of discussions. So hope you will be there with me. But those person who are integral, right, wholesome, fulfilled, they are able, according to depth psychology, to not be hurt during the natural occurring challenges in interpersonal relationships, which means an integral being lives without ever having to forgive anyone because there is nothing to be uh, heard about. So this is really interesting. Franco Zeffirelli's, I think, is the love story. There's a line with that. Love is to never say that you're sorry. Something in that line that goes really well together with this notion. But the question for us is, how do we forgive? Most importantly, how did Jesus show forgiveness? Well, Jesus did not only forgave through his words, but mostly, he forgave through clear, honest attitude, right? He did not use subterfuge. He was direct, and by doing that, he was vulnerable to some risk, if you think about it. But he also extended forgiveness to those so-called unfortunate, the unclean, they're called, the outcast, the needy. And when I read this, I think to myself, well, let's put my day to day life by my very contemporary experience. Who are the unfortunate, the unclean, the outcast, the needy in our lives today? And I can think very, very intimately, right, around me, what do I see? I see those unfortunate that perhaps lost their jobs and are in a financial state of need. Those who are perhaps victims of domestic violence, or those who have been orphaned, widowed, those who have lost the loved ones, those who are mentally unwell, physically sick, those right outside our doors who are in such a state of poverty and homelessness that they need to beg to survive. How did Jesus demonstrate his love? Well, he never accepted any conventions of race, ideology, political party, religion, right? He instead encompassed, welcomed all of us through love. How about that? So let's talk a little bit about some of the examples that we have about how Jesus demonstrated that, and he did a lot. But I'm going to choose a couple because we have a very small amount of time. And one way that Jesus taught about love, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful passage that you find in the Bible, specifically if you look for Luke chapter 10, he talks about the Good Samaritan, and he used that as a symbol of solidarity. So, what is the parable? How does it start? Well, the doctor of the law, or a lawyer, not unlike the lawyer we find today, but the person who was most knowledgeable, an expert, if you will, of the Mosaic laws, right? And he asked, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And in case you don't remember the story very quickly, the parable of a Good Samaritan tells the story of a man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And while on the way to Jericho, there's thieves on the road, and they attacked him, they robbed him of everything, they hit him. He was beaten to an inch of his life, and he was left naked on the road. And the road was not an easy, clear road. It was winding, and there's many hideouts for robbers at the time. And Jesus tells there are three characters, but the first one is a priest, right? That comes by, and when he sees the man, he actually crosses to the other side, and he shows no sign of love or compassion, right? He did not want to get involved. And that's what we need to think about it. Am I that bystander that moves away not to get involved, right? And the funny thing here is because by the nature of his position, he was the person that everyone would expect to provide help, right? To provide love in action, but he used words not acts of compassion to do that. The next person was a Levite, and he did exactly like the priest did, and he passes by. He does not show any sign of compassion, and he failed to help. And the last and final person is Dara, the Samaritan. And Samaritan here is the one considered the least likely to have shown compassion for the men. Why? Because Samaritans were considered a class of people by the Jews that were lower class, and there is a lot of historical data about it, but basically they intermarried with non-Jews. They did not keep the Mosaic laws. Therefore, most Jews at the time did not have anything to do with the Samaritans. Because the man was left naked, we have no idea what type of class, what type of job, what type of anything he belonged to. He was just a man. We don't know if he was Jew, if he was Gentile. But for the Samaritan, it did not make any difference, did it? He did not consider what is his race before I can come to him, what is his religion before I come to him. The Good Samaritan only saw a person in dire need of assistance. And so he lends assistance and he provides really the much beyond the minimum. He dresses the wounds, he disinfects it with wine, he soothes the pain with oil that he had. He puts the man in his animal and takes him to an inn close by and asks the innkeeper to take care of him, and that he would go back and he would compensate for any additional needs the man would have. So it is super interesting for us to think about it. Why did Jesus give this example, right? And it's important because we may be priests or Levites or Samaritans, doesn't matter who we are. What we need to consider is that those in need are those opportunities that are given to us to demonstrate how we love, how we demonstrate our compassion, right? And and he tells us that in fact in our everyday lives, we should think how we do demonstrate those things. What we are to others, how we are to others. If we want to live love, are we really living love in action, which is one of the definitions of compassion? And it's very interesting because with this little parable, he taught us so much. Another one that I wanted to very briefly talk it over is how Jesus freed someone who was in such pain out of her sense of guilt, right? So he, in his encounters with Mary Magdalene, no, not Dan Brown's expression of Jesus as Mary Magdalene's boyfriend or husband or father of her children, not that. She was someone who was grief stricken. She was vulnerable to whatever that was plaguing her sense of well-being. She was tormented and through this guilt, and he, Jesus, freed her of that sense of guilt. And just real quickly, there are many references in the Bible, 12 to 13 references to Mary Magdalene, and we can see the before and after she encounters Jesus as two different types of Mary, and that tormented soul, again, as I said, was set free by him, and it freed her so much that that controlled her life was gone. And so in a way, right, Jesus brought love through his teachings, in how he touched people with so much power. And it doesn't matter. It didn't matter if the person was a tax collector, an adulteress, a prodigal son, an impoverished widow. Nothing. Those were all the people that Jesus was able to love and influence and create value. Love was always on his agenda. Love was the instrument, the element that he brought light, and he assisted anyone in their moment of need, and he addressed them in body, mind, and soul. So, with that, I just wanted to say that Jesus became and Jesus still is the symbol of complete love for humankind. And it's very interesting because Jesus promised and gave the freedom through his humanity to humankind. So, with that, my friends, we come to our end for a discussion, the fourth chapter, and I appreciate you being here with me today, and I see you next. Bye bye.